Hi, welcome to Tea Time. My name is Adrienne Savage, and I'll be hosting this evening. Our guest is John Nicolai. He's a Republican councilman, as well as the Chief Director of Advanced Firearms Training and Qualification Institute, LLC. And today our topic is going to be Fast and Furious. So, John, how are you?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm fine. Appreciate
Okay. So, you know, it's very apropos that we're reviewing Fast and Furious because it is the anniversary of the border agent's death who was caught up in a line of fire with some of the weapons that were distributed by the ATF. Would you give us a little bit of a background of Fast and Furious?
Sure. You're absolutely right. December 14th of 2010 is when federal agent Brian Terry was murdered along the Mexican-Arizona border. This was in Peck Canyon, Arizona. And although it's been unsubstantiated whether or not the actual Fast and Furious guns were used to commit the murder, there were two, an AK-47 style rifle and a pistol that were found at the scene. And these were linked to a straw purchase that directly relates back to Fast and Furious. So this is a scandal that I certainly been following for a long time. It reaches far and wide into the administration and different government agencies. As a Second Amendment advocate and an avid shooter, I've been following this quite a bit.
So for those individuals who may not really be informed about Fast and Furious, exactly what was the whole idea behind it being set up by the administration as well as the ATF?
Well, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, going back to early 2009, had put an operation together. They tag-named it Fast and Furious, where it was basically, the concept was very much similar to what other agencies have done, FBI, DEA, where they would track money, sometimes drugs, and allow them to walk. With the idea being to trace footsteps and ultimately try to determine if it's a gang or a larger organization that's in play. It's unprecedented that this was ever done with firearms before. It was reckless, it was poorly thought out, poorly conceived, but this does go back. The roots of this go back to about 2009. And by the end of that year, the Washington Post had come out with an article, and it suggested that border state gun stores were responsible for the violence in Mexico and the cartel violence, the drug gangs that operate along the border. And it's horrific. If you live down there, you could only imagine how dangerous a place it is. But they were blaming our Second Amendment rights for the and our so-called lax gun laws for the infiltration of guns into Mexico.
Well, I also know that Feinstein for a long time has been quoting, 80 to 90% of the, firearms that are found in Mexico are coming across the border from the U.S. But I know I was reading on an article where in those numbers they're including, firearms that are manufactured in the United States,
yes,
as well as firearms that have been, I guess, allotted from the U.S. to sell to the Mexican government. And they were saying that when they actually looked at the number of guns that they got back and then they traced them back, a mere 25% of them were actually, purchased from border handgun stores. So.
You're absolutely right. There are two material points here that sort of gets confused when you're looking at these statistics. The first thing is that a lot of the seized guns that they're tracing, they are tracing to the United States.
Yes.
However, they're not account for the vast majority of the guns. They're only looking at 25% of the guns on the Mexican side. 75 to 80% of the guns that are used in these crimes actually come from other South American countries, and they're coming as a conduit through these South American countries, but they're manufactured in Eastern Europe, in Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, Russia. So you have a lot of old Soviet-style weapons that are coming through the southern border of Mexico. That's one point. The second point is exactly what you said, that this doesn't take into account the tens of thousands of firearms that are legally transferred from the United States to Mexico as part of a treaty. We would be breaking treaties if we did not follow very strict guidelines and protocols for this. Those guns are being stolen and being misappropriated, and they're winding up in the hands of gang owners. So you're absolutely right.
So, you know, one of the charges of Fast and Furious, which we're finding there's so much fallout in terms of human life on both sides of the borders, as well as just, you know, them trying to tie this to the Second Amendment. So, from your point of view, exactly how do you think that they were going to be able to actually gain a positive position from doing this?
Well, I think there were a couple of seminal moments. One in particular was when, it was back around May of 2010, when Mexican President Calderon had addressed a joint session of Congress. And during that very defiant speech, he chided American lawmakers on two issues. One was their anti-immigration policies, and the second was to allow the assault weapons ban of 2004 to expire. Interestingly, and coincidentally, we are currently watching the Department of Justice challenge Arizona's immigration laws.
Right.
Incredible. It's incredible to me that as a taxpayer, that my taxes are funding my own government challenging a state to take into their own hands what the federal government absolutely refuses to do. On the other issue, the assault weapons ban of 2004, it expired, and you couldn't have asked for a better way to manufacture facts.
Right.
You know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there certainly isn't a better way to create the facts necessary to substantiate what President Calderon was saying, in that it's a porous border.
Right.
Yeah, people might be coming over north to seek employment. However, the issue that he was raising was that our Second Amendment freedoms are directly responsible for Mexicans losing their lives.
Right. So, because even when I look at this and I see that they selected Arizona, and I almost wonder whether or not it was almost like a double whammy against Arizona in terms of the immigration laws, and then setting up Fast and Furious in, you know, the state of Arizona as well. Do you have any thoughts about that, or?
Well, and the entire border is an issue here. Arizona happens to be an area where you have political pressure for allowing the influx of cheap labor to come in. So there are interests out there clearly that are looking at that. When you look at the other direction, when you look at guns going south, the Bureau, the ATF, created this operation. They knowingly allowed multiple purchases of military-style weapons. We're not talking bolt-action .22 rifles here. We're talking 50 caliber BMG sniper rifles. You're talking about AK-47s, full auto. I mean, these are military-grade weapons that they knew, and there were whistleblowers along the way since then. I mean, it goes back to around the end of 2010 when some of the first whistleblowers were basically stating, these are field agents
Right.
that were saying, there is no way that we can trace these. We're losing track of them. You had gun stores that were being excoriated in the press.
Right.
Okay, by being these business owners and people like in Houston, Bill Carter. Here's a legitimate businessman in compliance with all of the massive regulations of BATF forms and governance. Here he's being told that he is part of the problem, and he is the reason why there are gangs shooting each other, killing politicians, killing police officers in Mexico.
Weren't many of these gun store owners actually keeping all the appropriate records and reporting? And supposedly, these agents were supposed to arrest some of these individuals who were purchasing in excess of 5 weapons at a time. So they had all the information to actually go after these individuals, and they chose not to, which is, I guess, another, mystery that we're trying to uncover at this point.
It's even worse than that. Some of these gun shop owners were proactive, and because a lot of times they would get a call from someone interested in purchasing a vast number of military-style firearms, and they didn't have them in stock. They actually had to go out and supply up. So they would call their ATF field agents. They would let them know that on Wednesday at 1600, I'm going to have somebody come through the door. If you want to set up surveillance tapes or whatever you need to do to nab this individual, they were cooperating to the full extent that they possibly could. And yet, they were told to stand down. The field agents that went up to the chain of command were told by their commanders to stand down, that this was approved all the way to the top. And not just the top of the ATF, but the Department of Justice as well.
Wow. So at the end of the day, you know, as usual, you have people who want to do something about the situation and are forced to go along in order to keep their jobs. That's pretty distressing. But, you know, we're going to pick this up after our break. And, you know, for everyone out there, please remember to take a look at New Jersey Tea Party Coalition.org. And we'll be right back.
With all the excitement happening with the Tea Party, it may be a little hard to separate fact from fiction. Find out the truth for yourself. Visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition's website at www.njteapartycoalition.org. You may find a common voice to your concerns on how our government is functioning, and discover a means to help restore our nation based on the proven principles of our Constitution.
Welcome back to Tea Time. We're discussing Fast and Furious with John Nicolai. He's the Chief Director of AdvancedFirearms.org. Okay, so when we left, we were talking about the whistleblowers. So what's become of the whistleblowers?
They started to come to light around the end of 2010. The very beginning, January of 2011, you had supervisors at ATF that were threatening the whistleblowers quite strongly. Representative Grassley and the chair, Issa, came out strongly and threatened the ATF that with any kind of retaliation against these officers, that it would be unwise and illegal to retaliate. Since then, though, there was one individual who was fired. He's an Arizona agent, and he it's incredible to think that just coming out and stating the facts that this was an ill-conceived, poorly thought up, and horrifically executed operation, that these individuals, 24 years on the job, that they lost their jobs. And it's you know, Vince Cefalu was one agent in particular who, as a direct result of his involvement in Fast and Furious, no longer is a federal agent.
Wow. So the consequences really, we haven't really seen any consequences for anyone higher up the chain, the people who are responsible for putting this program together.
There's collateral damage. I mean, you have the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Carlos Pascual. He resigned amongst considerable pressure. That was on or about March of 2011. As you sort of roll forward, you have testimony where Senator Issa wanted, he had to subpoena records for the ATF. Now, the ATF claimed that these records were part of an ongoing investigation and they didn't want to cooperate. But they stonewalled almost immediately. And then the Attorney General came out, and Eric Holder perjured himself before Congress. There's no other way to say it. There's no clean, easy way to say it. He came out, he said that he only knew of Fast and Furious for a few weeks. This was almost immediately found to be false. CBS came out with a report very, very shortly thereafter. It was about May of 2011 that discredited this, that he and Assistant Attorney General Lanny Breuer knew of this for a long time before that.
Now, weren't there some memos that came out, I believe maybe it was the testimony of the gentleman's name was, I think, Stryker, on February 3rd, who testified that he had issues with it, with the Fast and Furious program, and then there was the second set of memos from February 4th to challenge, I guess, what the testimony, which they had to actually end up taking back because
Yes.
the information was
That was
incorrect.
Agent Strider.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
So.
Well, you had one of the key pieces of evidence that Representative Issa had put out there was the proof that Attorney General Holder and the President of the United States, Obama, knew that guns were being allowed to walk into Mexico. This goes to the highest levels of government, and Representative Issa is on record saying that he has proof of this. Yeah, what's happened? What's collateral damage about this? You have, Ken Melson, the director of ATF, resigned, but you have two individuals. You have Brian Terry, and you have Brian Terry was a federal agent, border agent, and you have ICE agent Cepeda.
Right.
These are two individuals, and who knows how many more are to come.
Yeah.
This is a tip of an iceberg. This is an operation that, when it was questioned, what was their comeback? Their quote was, "If you want to make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs."
So, did the Mexican government have any idea this was going on?
Not only did the Mexican government have no idea, but our own ATF agents in Mexico, operating within Mexican authorities, had no idea that this was going on. It wasn't until Brian Terry's death that Fast and Furious really saw the light of day.
So we have two agents that we know of so far who have been harmed directly by this. We have probably tens of thousands of Mexican citizens that have been harmed by this.
Yes.
I mean,
Scores.
The numbers have increased significantly in terms of the number of deaths from Mexican cartels over the past year. They're finding open graves, mass graves. So at this point, is there any hope, in your opinion, that we're going to see much more of this uncovered?
You will, and I hate to say it, but I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. The problem is that you still have ranking Democrats on that committee that are interested in stiffer gun control laws and increasing the funding for ATF.
So how do they propose to do that?
Well, we just had a police officer shot in New York City.
Right.
Okay? Instead of focusing on the fact that this was a criminal act by someone who had a very long history of violence and was in fact sought, there was an open warrant for him in North Carolina. They're focusing on gun control laws and the fact that there was a gun used, okay? It wasn't until days later that it came out that the judge in this case was allowed this career criminal to walk without bail. I mean, it's so when you have an agenda, and this administration truly has an agenda,
They do.
okay, then they're going to allow operations like Fast and Furious to occur. They're going to look the other way, as long as the ends justify the means.
So where do you see us today in information that's potentially going to be uncovered?
Well, right now it's complete stonewalling. The Washington, D.C. has shut down. You have, I heard the testimony of Janet Napolitano, and it's disgraceful to hear directors of agencies that were involved and had their own agents killed by this, not knowing and not claiming responsibility, not apparently interested in uncovering the truth. I understand if there is ongoing investigations, that's a priority.
Right.
But we're talking about a Senate oversight committee. These are individuals that should not be getting redacted materials. They should be getting full disclosure. There should be transparency. That's all we're asking for.
Is there? It seems to me that this is completely, partisan. I mean, it's cutting straight down lines. Is there any hope that we're going to see people on the other side of the aisle?
I'll give credit where credit is due, and there were 31 Democrats that came out, and
yeah.
they did say that the Attorney General and the Department of Justice should fully cooperate. The administration is the puppet master, though,
Right.
and as long as they're the ones that are appointing the new ATF head, which is no friend of the Second Amendment in this country, as long as they're seeing their agenda through, I don't know. I'm not very confident that we're going to see justice.
And I guess as for Eric Holder, I mean, Eric Holder has his history. And at this point, I know on Greta Van Susteren, they had a Senator or Representative Michael Grimm, who has proposed a resolution, a House resolution to a vote of no confidence in Holder,
Yeah.
which was drawn up on the 12th, and it's currently supported by about 20 different senators at this time. Now, I don't know how much of an impact that's going to have on Holder, or whether or not it's going to make a difference either way, but at least it hopefully can begin to build some pressure.
Well, where we are right now is that we have several Republican presidential candidates. We have a number of senators and over 50 congressmen that are directly calling for Attorney General Eric Holder to resign, along with a number of police chiefs along the southern border. The question is, when did all of these individuals know? How high did it go? And personally, if President Obama did know, then why is he not only failing to demand Holder step down, but his administration is abruptly sealing court documents that as part of the investigation for Agent Terry's death.
They just sealed that about a week ago.
Yeah.
So with the sealing of that information, I guess there's no hope that we're going to find out any of the details. You know, it's, you know,
Well, there's an old Latin saying that though the heavens may fall, may justice be served. Who knows? I mean, I look at Agents Terry and Cepeda as more than just eggs
Right.
as part of an omelet. And it's troubling to me. It should be deeply disturbing to every red-blooded American. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're independent, the Second Amendment applies to everyone.
absolutely.
Okay, and the Second Amendment, you can argue, is the foundation of our entire Constitution. Without it, what's to defend any other of the amendments in our Bill of Rights? So it's troubling, and it's something that you don't hear enough of. I really, truly appreciate the Tea Party taking the time to cast some light on this, because the media has not done a great job of bringing the facts out.
Well, undoubtedly, you know, this is not the last that we're going to hear about Fast and Furious. We're probably going to hear about it daily, and hopefully our candidates will begin discussing it. So we've just about run out of time. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and your information about Fast and Furious. And to everyone out there, please make sure you go to the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition website to find out more information. In a couple of weeks, you can see a tape of this show there, as well as see us on Channel 76. So thank you so much for your time, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.